Hello everybody, welcome to Devohn and Friends, an interview series hosted by myself, Devohn Bland. Here I am with Senthil Rajasekharan. How are you good?
Hey.
How are you doing, Senthil?
Good, Devohn. Thanks for having me, buddy.
I'm really glad you're able to be a part of this. Thank you so much for coming. We took some pictures, talked a little bit. Right off the bat, one thing I wanted just to say to you is that I really appreciate, doing comedy within the Twin Cities. I haven't been doing it for that long, but once I met you, you were always a very supportive person, always just a genuine person in general.
Thank you, man.
I don't know how to... Have you always been this way?
No. So, this, I learned,
Okay.
I was very, in a survival mode. I grew up in India.
Right.
When you come from India, it's a country of 1 billion people, right? So you gotta survive. So when I was young, and plus I didn't have, like I told you, I didn't have a dad. My dad passed away.
Right.
So I had to take care of my family, right? So I was in survival mode, I was like, I don't want to say it, but I would, if I'm hungry, I'm going to steal your freaking lunch. It sounds very, cruel looking back, but I was actually physically hungry, not even, metaphorically hungry.
Right,
Physically, I was physically hungry. I was poor, I was very survival mode. And then I somehow, I was lucky and I was able to find a job in IT. And then after 2 decades, right, of that, I started, I think, getting old makes you, mellows the word people use a little bit. So I think, it happens naturally. And so, and then, I had time to, think about all of the nice things other people had done to me. So, and then I was like, man, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna pay back? So one of the things, I think, I can give back is like being very kind to other people. So and then I started to realize that, I'm not altruistic, but one of the keys to happiness, people say, is being kind to others. So then I realized that there's also a selfish thing there, so if you're nice to other people and you meet other nice people like you, and then the world, you build around yourself becomes nicer. I hope.
I think that's true to a certain extent, because it's in one way it's another survival thing of trying to make sure your surroundings are positive.
Right.
After coming out of a lot of negativity, you want to make sure the people that you're surrounded with are putting goodness in your life.
Right.
Making sure you're not doing toxic things.
Right.
You're checking them to make sure they're not making you miserable, but also in a way they're checking you to make sure you're not making yourself miserable.
Right. So along the way, I learned that, so I'm still working on it, so all of this is a work in progress, because from morning to evening, you go through a million thought processes. So to keep yourself, you said checking other people are not doing toxic things, right? I have to check also myself that I don't do toxic things, right?
Right.
Because one of the things that, since I grew up in India, there is always this spiritualness surrounding you, and then a lot of these philosophies surrounding you. So your brain is like a monkey, it keeps jumping, from tree to tree to tree. One tree is the good fruit, the other tree is the bad fruit. It keeps jumping. So you got to keep checking yourself too. So it is a constant struggle, work in every day. Sometimes I post some stuff on Twitter that is not like me, but that's how I felt at that moment. It's because that's how I felt. And then I would have remorse, but then it's that's me. So it's a work in progress. My goal is to be one, to be as genuine. Along the way, like when I said, like I grew from the survival mode to like be kind to other people mode. One of the things I learned is that you can't lie, to yourself or to others. So I'm working on all of these things. So yeah.
I think it's always...
You're right, yeah.
We talk about this work that we do for ourselves, and it's always a process. It's never like I'm working on this and one day it's going to be finished. It's like a continuing throughout the stages of your of your life.
I'm clapping because all of those things, you're at such a young age, you understand it as a process, so which is great because it took me a much longer time to learn that. One day, like the clouds are not going to part, and then there's sunlight, the angel singing, angel voice, and then you're suddenly, like, I am this person. You got to keep working on, on it. You got to keep, So you're right.
Very true.
Awesome.
You mentioned a little bit ago about your father passing and things like that, and earlier we were talking about how growing up and going through life, you always like kind of felt bad about being the serious person. But you just mentioned the survival elements of your upbringing and things like that. How much of being the serious person comes from this trauma of your dad died and then trying to figure out processing all that?
I think all of it, because my dad died when I was, I think, 6 years old, and so all of my relatives, I was surrounded by relatives who did not, I think, have very good coping grief mechanism.
Yeah,
it was a traumatic thing for me, especially because my mom was 25 maybe. She was very young and she had 4 kids.
Wow.
4 mouths to feed in a poor country, and there was literally no hope. That's like Twins winning the baseball World Series 10 years in a row.
Right.
Those are the odds. Like 10 Twins are suddenly the dynasty. What are the odds of that? So she had very low odds, and so all my relatives, what they can do is come and tell the little kids, your dad is not there, you have to be responsible. And so from a very young age, being serious and being a responsible person was the only thing I could think of. So I think most of it was just that, and since I didn't grow up with a dad, I can't tell how other people develop their personalities. The way I developed the personality was through a lot of trial and error. By trial and error, I mean getting my ass kicked. So you won't even believe how my ass is sore. So I got my ass kicked every turn. So you can't see the wounds when you see me, but it's there. My ass hurts. So so I think so over time I developed a personality, if you will. So if you had a dad, you don't have to think about it. A lot of the times, the way a personality character develops is you're just hanging out with your dad, and then you do something, and then your dad is why you do that, and then you make the adjustments, as a kid. Then every time you have a question, I think as a grown-up man, every time you're in a situation, you have to react. So we call that personality. How you react. In stories, characters. How does a character react to a situation? That becomes the personality trait of the character, right? In storytelling,
right.
That. So most of the times, I think in real life, people are reacting the way their dads taught them.
That's real. That's real. I've been thinking a lot about that. The different lessons I learned from my dad, and well, just as an adult, what I've carried from my parents, like what traits from them that I do have. I realize that a lot of people tell me I'm a very chill person, and a lot of that comes from my dad. He's not always chill. He's got a lot of issues, but for the most part, he's a very mellow person. And I think I picked up a lot of that myself.
Okay.
Not having your dad, do you think you picked up on anything developing that personality? How much of that is just things that you went through the process of, and things that you had to seek out, from other relatives, your mom, siblings, things like that?
That's a very good question. Because I left the previous answer unfinished.
Oh, okay.
So how did I? So you followed up. You're a great interviewer. You stayed in the mode. You asked the great question. So here's the thing. It's because I didn't want to, pick up stuff from my relatives, because my uncles, a lot of them are still in my village. They're poor peasants. And I didn't see myself as that. There are things I could have learned from them. There are things that I picked up a little bit from my grandfather. So all of my, because of my family situation, there were not a lot of good role models around me. That's the short answer. Because of my, my uncles were, aloof, were away, so they were not, I didn't have anybody that I could model, So what I didn't pick up from adult, I didn't have an adult, a role model at all, right? So here's the stupid stuff that the little child that I was did. I would watch movies, right? And then freaking those movies became, I would develop a hero complex,
Yeah.
And for a long time, I couldn't understand it because it's so embedded, in your psyche. Now I understand, Senthil, things don't happen the way they happen in movies.
That's real. Yeah, that's real.
So that's what happened to me. So that's how fucked up I was for a long time. This character that is walking around thinking that I'm the hero in the movie,
Right.
You can't, explain it. You see me, I'm like, oh, that's another guy, but inside, I'm picked up all these things from, the things that I watch.
Right.
And so I was pretty dumb for a long time, and then I had to unlearn those. That's the problem, not many people get the chance to unlearn,
That's very true. It's very true.
And so I put myself through the process of unlearning all that shit. And then how do I become me? How do I become real? And that's where comedy became a therapy. Because you can't act like, Bruce Willis on stage. You can't act like freaking Eddie Murphy on that Red special on stage.
No, you can't.
You
can't
have
be
to
delirious,
you have to find out. So this is where comedy came in and then kind of saved me. All of this self-analysis, So I had the luck. I was lucky to unlearn all of the shit and then become myself slowly over a long period, and then develop, who I wanted to be. I had a vague idea of who I wanted to be. I wanted to be somebody, who understands things. I don't have a better word. I was talking to my brother-in-law. The word that I used was, I certainly, don't consider myself an intellectual. I would want to be somebody who knows how to understand things in the world, how to, I'm curious about, the world.
Right.
I'm a curious person, so.
A little bit, going off that, we talked about, going back to the, being a serious person, you used the word observation. And what I said is, a lot of times people who are very observant tend to be a little bit more serious because, it's that thing of in a group, there has to be one serious person. If everyone's being all goofy, something bad's gonna happen. In a car, there has to be one person being like, "Hey, make sure that your eyes are on the road. Otherwise, we're just gonna crash."
Right.
Going off of that, you mentioned that stand-up helped you develop some things. How long have you been doing stand-up? And like, how did you get started?
Man, April 2020 was my 10-year anniversary.
Oh, it's been a decade. God.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
So it's been a decade. Yeah.
What was the first open mic you did, or the first time you performed?
So it was at some bar,
Oh.
So
Does the bar still exist or not?
maybe not. I don't want to talk about it because 10 years, a lot of things can happen. So
Very
I don't
true,
know if it exists, doesn't exist. It was at a bar, and so I was scouting, for 3 months, and I carried a notebook, and I kept, writing stuff that I thought were funny, and I kept writing, and I kept scouting, and then I kept scouting all the mics, hanging out 3 months, and then introduced myself. Never for the first 3 months I went on stage because I was so scared. And then one day, a close buddy of mine, P-Bar, Patrick Rand Bar, P-Bar we call him, he said, Senthil, you're going up tonight.
Just put you on the spot.
Yeah. I'm like, no man, I had my notebook ready. And I'm like, no man, I don't think I'm ready. No, there's nobody in the room. There's nobody in the audience. You gotta go up.
Yeah.
And I went into the room and I looked inside the room. It was empty. It was always empty.
Yeah.
This is in a bar, and there's nobody there. So I said yes. But right before the show started, people, 2 or 3 tables filled up.
Oh wow.
And then I got nervous. But I went up and I was giggling at my own jokes. It was terrible. It was terrible. But I was already, when I started, I was already 36,
Okay.
So I was 36.
Right.
So it's pretty old. So I knew that, this is you're swinging the bat. This is the first pitch, you're swinging the bat. You're going to miss. So I knew that, I had to have 10,000 million more swings before, I get anywhere decent,
Right.
So I knew that. And so I would take all the insults. So those ass kickings that I got when I was on stage, those didn't hurt as much because I knew my ass is going to fall down.
That's really.
Yeah. So that's how, I started, yeah.
And how, so you, like I said earlier, you were one of the most genuine people I've ever met in the comedy scene. I'm still very new to it and discovering things, but you've been a huge help in many ways. How much has, COVID aside, how much has the comedy scene changed here in Minneapolis in the last 10 years?
It's a very good question, man. I'm glad, you said that I have been helpful. I'm glad you said that. A lot of people, I'm just passing it on, a lot of people helped. So comedy is one of those things where people come from different places,
Right.
When I came to comedy, I came from a place of deep sorrow. I just got divorced. So I came from a very, very deep place of sorrow, and people, were accepting, So a lot of the times people who come into the comedy world, they also, like me, I assume require or need acceptance.
Yeah.
And so I always, remember that. And so thanks for saying that, I'm genuine. I try to be, because I remember that I came from that deep place of sorrow. And so it is highly likely that other people are also. So I try to pass it on, I learned it from others to pass it on.
Right.
So I hope, I keep working on that, and then, remain true to that, because I really want comedy to be a place where people come to and feel, they can be themselves,
That's very
So, I forgot the other question.
Is
How has comedy? That's a very good question.
Yeah.
How has comedy? So comedy has changed, obviously, with the world a ton. You know, I can't summarize in even 30 minutes how the world has changed. So, putting COVID aside, one of the biggest changes that has happened is that the Me Too movement changed it a lot. So, and then people are aware of the struggles of people who are minority trying to get into comedy. And then, of course, social media has changed it, a lot. So those are, like the big points of how comedy, the world of comedy has changed. It's not the, I'm doing this circuit, I'm a road comic, I'm doing this circuit. There are these, this booker, he puts you on the road for 3 months, and then, like you do all these bars, and then you come back, like people do that, but it's not the same as that before. What it used to be. It's the breweries, it's the uproar mics, it's the, my friend likes to call it, DIY. People put events together at bars and breweries, so it's mostly, like that,
How would you say this is, in what ways has this helped comedy? In what ways has it hindered it going from like these circuits to these sort of DIY spaces?
Yeah, so I can only give a subjective answer because I'm a brown guy, I can only give a subjective answer. The whole social media thing has given people who did not have a voice a channel to express their, like all of their frustration, So I love social media for that. And 10 years ago I thought comedy was that means where the people who did not have a voice can have a platform. It's true to some extent, but I feel like having something like a social media kind of platforms where I'm going to use a big word, I hate using big words, but it's called disintermediation. There's no agency, like there's no booker controlling, like who gets on the road, So that as a minority, like is a good thing for me. And I think for others, because in Montana, a booker is most likely to pick, a funny guy. But if the booker is a white guy, he's going to think that another white guy is the funny guy, unless a Richard Pryor comes along.
Right.
To him, a funny black guy is Richard Pryor. There's no, there's no other funny role models for other minorities, and even for like a different variety of within a minority group, a lot of people, like stereotype certain minorities into a box, and then that's what they think, like that person has to do,
Right,
for instance, let me make it more concrete. For instance, like people would say, oh, do your Indian accent,
Really?
Of course. So it's not today. The incidents of that happening today are less, but it has happened. Tell me, tell me a Uber joke. Tell me, so people expect stereotype. That's their idea. If you don't do that, then in that booker's view, in that white Booker's view eyes, you're not funny,
Interesting.
So I think, like this disintermediation, like using social media platforms, it's a great thing. I hope it stays that way. But I know, like somebody, like some white supremacist is gonna come and fuck it up,
Yeah. It's wild how that happens. How like we try to figure out ways to get ourselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of hindered by these glass ceilings.
Yeah, it's not even a glass ceiling anymore. It's the tiki torches. They will burn it down with the tiki. It's not glass. Devohn, there's no glass ceiling anymore.
Right.
There's a guy who's the president who's yelling, "Proud Boys, stand back, stand down,"
Very true.
So there's no glass ceiling. They've broken the glass ceiling themselves and they're coming in with a tiki torch to burn us down. So
Right. From above to try to like
Yeah.
block it off.
They
so maybe
hear
it's a
too much.
ceiling of fire now or something.
Yeah, it's like they are trying to exterminate like we are cockroaches.
Yeah. That's
Sorry I used it, like a deep racist word, but that's what's happening because people are trying to tell me that I have more power than the white society. That's a lie.
It's scary to think about, and it's very real. It's very that's the reality we live in. That's the reality that many people don't realize that we live in, or more white people, I would say, right? Realizing that we live in. In what ways have you had to, performing in stand-up, or not even just stand-up, but just in general, in what ways have you had to, do that work of getting white people in your life to sort of realize that this is the reality? Have you had to do the whole? Have you had the experience of them not realizing that the shit is bad, and then they come up to you and they're like, "I didn't realize shit was this bad," and then you're like, "It's always been this way."
So I haven't unfortunately done that because conflict situations are difficult for me to handle. I'm not very good at handling, like conflict situations. So anytime, like I have to directly conflict somebody, I either because, like there's a huge amount of like, I'm going to use another big word. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
It's called cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
They are so far, their head is so far up their asses that I can't bring them to where I am.
Right.
And so it becomes, like a huge challenge to tell, like white people, hey, I don't even stand a chance in your world. You built this system. I don't even stand a chance. You telling me at my workplace that I need to be, like proactive, sense of urgency, like those corporate buzzwords, and then, like match up to you. It's great. I will do it. But then, in your eyes, I'll never be good enough.
Right.
So, if I try to say that I'm good enough, then there's going to be a conflict.
Right.
And that conflict happens like a challenge system, like, oh, Senthil, it's great that you did this, but you didn't do that, like, well, so if you keep challenging me like that, arguing like that, it's not a reasonable argument at all, because no matter like how much I try to convince you, if you are already prejudiced, there's nothing I can do to change your mind, like so it seems like a cowardly argument, but I make this argument because the conflict situation I'm not good at is not a cowardly thing. I'm not like pulling back. I'm not being a coward. If you look at history, Native Americans have tried to say the same thing. I'm sure, like they didn't like, somebody coming into their village and then destroying it.
Right. Yeah.
They definitely said something.
Right.
But that's not what you hear. Hispanics, Spanish-speaking people have probably said the same thing. And I know black people have said the same thing. And I know Asian Americans have said the same thing. And along comes Senthil, like I'm from, like South Asia, a new region. And you're telling me that, like you haven't listened to all these people, but you're going to listen to me. I have trouble. You need to convince me of that argument.
That's right.
So that's why, like, not pulling back, but it's just, I'm not being a coward. It's just, like, there's no, there doesn't seem to be, a change in attitude.
Well, yeah.
Even after the protest, George Floyd protest.
Yeah, it's hard to try to put that work in with them when there is no change. With that, that wanting them to see things a certain way, showing them the history of how things have been a certain way, and them not putting any effort into changing.
Yeah. I think like this is why I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is why like this has to come from like the education board. Like it has to be in, because ignorance comes from the idea of like knowledge is something that children get, and then before they start questioning things, like as an adolescent you start wondering like the deeper questions. As children like you just absorb. So when they are absorbing, they should also be, this country history properly taught should include like more about the struggles of black people, the struggles of indigenous people, more about the struggles of like Spanish speaking people. It should be in the textbooks. It should not be considered as like as indoctrination, because that's what really happened. Like people lost their land, people lost their rights, and like this country needs to acknowledge that in their history textbooks. They need to learn, the kids need to learn from their, like geometry, they need to learn from their teachers.
Very true. I agree with that 100%.
That's why I say I'm not a coward pulling back. I'm saying that like the effective means of like how to change people's minds is like is through education, and the Department of Education has to do that.
Very true.
I will get tired. I can't do comedy then.
Well, it comes back to this process of like similar to what you were saying earlier, but different in a way. White people have to. A lot of people, we have to unlearn things and learn newer things, but white people have to unlearn this sort of like, not even sort of, but this twisted history they've been felt.
Right.
That's embedded in American culture, that they are taught is, unquestionably the law.
Right.
That
They're
taught is 100% how things are.
Yeah. You can't act like you're just. A lot of these, like the Kenosha white supremacist guy, the one with the AR-15 who shot 2 protesters, people like those, they act out of ignorance first, and that ignorance comes because like they haven't been presented the whole picture. They think that like they are protecting their buddies. But what you're really doing is you're shooting down people that are asking for their rights. They act like, these are the people that act like oh, I was just born yesterday.
Right.
You can't like, you have to be presented. The failure is not the guy with the AR-15. I think the school he went to, their teachers and his parents, they failed him.
Because they probably, they failed him in the sense that like from a young age he probably like he knew he could do these things, and then, like no one probably ever told him, hey, you can't. Like there's white people get. I grew up in the suburbs, and I grew up hanging out with a lot of people who had access to guns. Who were very conservative to a certain degree, and their mentality, they're very aggressive, very angry, but never told, hey, you need to calm down, or hey, you're being very toxic. It's just this sort of boys will be boys, and he is being a man and things like that.
Okay.
These sort of like these kids who end up shooting people, these people who end up shooting people, these guys who end up massacring people from a young age. At some point, they're taught that this is okay. Their hate is okay.
Right. Yeah.
Killing someone is fine. They're raised to look at people as other.
Right.
Many times I had situations where the guys I grew up with, they'd say, Devohn, I don't hang out with a lot of black people, but I love hanging out with you because you're different.
Right, yeah.
And what different meant was I talked differently, I dressed differently. Okay. I wasn't what they considered to be negative in terms of being black. When they saw me, they didn't see me. They didn't even see black, really. They just saw a person who was probably doing something that they connected to whiteness.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
From a young age, they're not taught.
They were they were in a way stereotyping you.
Yeah. But from a young age, they're not taught how whiteness can be negative. They're taught all of the ways that it is positive. So then they go out and they kill black people. They kill other people. It's violent, but they don't see it as a bad violence because they always see one of us as the enemy.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah.
We got a little bit serious right now.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know how many jokes I even squeezed in here because I think, like I said before, podcasts let me be myself.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to struggle to get the punchlines in. Remember, like you said something about the ceiling, and I said, no, they're burning down. They're coming through the ceiling. Yeah. I thought that was funny.
That's pretty good.
Anyway, so. Yeah.
One thing I would like to ask before we wrap this up, and thank you so much for helping out with this and being a part of it.
I hope you do many more of these. To keep doing it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I love uproar, man. Uproar,
Uproar.
Yeah, I love it.
You like
it's a game changer.
Thank you. You've been performing. This is your 10th year in stand-up. We had talked maybe last year at some point about you doing some stuff out in LA.
Right.
Just to get a change of scenery and things, but also you mentioned how you've done a lot of things in Minneapolis, and you felt like now was the time for you to venture outward. And you were there for maybe 2 or 3 months, I believe.
6 months, I would say. I was there September.
Well, you had come back at one point.
February, March. So I would say 6 months.
Okay.
But then I used to work remotely.
Yeah.
I used to have a 2-week schedule. 2 weeks there, and then 2 weeks. But I had an apartment in LA, so. I wanted to go there to meet people who are doing comedy and to put myself out there and get more work.
Right.
So and I met a lot of people. I was able to do shows. I had a lot of interesting experiences. I was able to get on stage at the Comedy Store, and I wasn't even booked. So I had all these, within the first 3 months, interesting experiences. And so definitely, once all of this pandemic stuff settles down, I want to be in the bigger cities so I can get more opportunities. The opportunities, Minneapolis is great, but the opportunities are more for what I wanted to do in the bigger cities.
Right.
So I'm going to work on getting establishing myself in a bigger city, So
I'll say this. I remember us having that conversation, and then you leaving, and then you came back, and I was always excited to see you because you're just such a great person. But I remember your set. You still had some of the same material, but your set had I don't want to say polished because that that's thrown out a lot. But like it had become different. Your pacing and your timing was a bit faster. You smiled and laughed a little bit more when you told the jokes. You even got a little bit more physical in your delivery. And I think at the time you were only there for like a small amount of months, but the shift had changed a little bit from you performing these jokes in Minneapolis and then, having worked on them for 10 years and then being so good. But then just a little bit of getting out of this scene and then coming back had like a huge effect on that. How do you think that worked out for you?
I'm glad, you noticed, you paid attention. Thank you.
I'm also very observant.
Thanks, man. Because remember I was talking about getting my ass kicked a lot?
Yeah.
So since I knew very few people in LA, I would go to these random mics and so I got my ass kicked even more at these mics, and these mics, in LA make you work harder. And also I actively worked on getting a tighter set in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And so I had to, I had to work a lot more harder, to get that, to get good, So I'm glad you noticed. So it definitely, was a very conscious thing because sometimes when you're in Minneapolis doing an open mic, you're among friends.
Right.
And people who have known you for a long time. And so they trust you, and then you trust them back, and then you play around, and you loosen up in the sense of like, I'm trying things, but it's not gonna be a home run, but you're trying things out, and so it appears like a little bit, not tight, not prepared,
Right.
But in LA, I had to be prepared all the time, every time, and so that's why I had to change that, and I had to be, so I hate to use the word, I had to be more professional because it's the industry, man. So
That's real.
Yeah.
That's real. Well, this has been really dope. I'm super thankful for you being a part of this. Before we end things, going back to what we talked about earlier, the survival mode,
right,
and how when you're in survival mode you have to be hyper vigilant of your surroundings. You've had to be a serious person with that, and you've talked about embracing that and then finding ways in which you could be the silly person. Currently, right now, with everything happening,
right,
with tons of people are in survival mode. You kind of have to be. But what ways are you finding yourself able to be silly outside of that? Like moments of relief. What is helping you get through?
I want to say, talking to family, but I would be lying,
Yeah.
So, because there is still, we are on WhatsApp. My mom, my sisters, and my brother, we're all on social media. Sometimes we have a private group and then we chat. So I'm not being silly there. I honestly I'm not I'm not doing anything silly or anything to entertain myself, but I'm just doing things that I wanted to do, like reading books, and then I picked up the guitar and then banging away on the guitar a little bit. It's not serious. It's just it's a relaxing thing to do. So I'm doing things like that, and of course writing material. So I'm doing all these things, but not particularly, like anything goofy or silly, except like the guitar thing.
Do you feel as though the guitar is like, it seems like it's more of a mellow thing, whereas like stand-up is more you coming out of this shell and figuring stuff out. This is more of a just like a calming sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned that, like after I picked up the guitar, I learned the first song, like, man, this shit is gonna change me. The guitar can change you because, like it goes deep into the hurts the soul.
Yeah.
So if you really want to sing, then it's either because of the song I picked or because, the guitar itself, it can make you like a different personality. It can change your personality just like comedy can, So the way I'm, like finding relief with that is that I keep learning. The survival mode taught me to keep learning things, and so I just kept learning things, because I always wanted to, since I didn't have clear direction, I wanted to survive. All I knew was like, I want to learn that so I can be better. I want to learn that so I can be better. So I think, like picking up the guitar is an extension of that, so it's not really, it's helping me in the sense that, I'm keep, the days go by.
Right. That's right. They do go by. Well, Senthil, thank you so much for being a part of this. This is Devohn and Friends. You're gonna probably see this up in like maybe a few months or something like that. But thank you so much. It's always dope to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Devohn. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.